We've all seen the World War II movies where German officers are sometimes depicted in their large leather coats, their swastika armbands, and a large nasty scar, usually on their left cheek. Some people would think this is a Hollywood prop to make the character look a bit more evil and more like a villain. However, these facial scars were actually very common amongst Austrian and German officers going back to World War I. Even Otto von Bismarck, Chancellor of the German Empire, said that a man's courage and bravery can be determined by the number of scars on his cheek. So how did they get these scars? Well, that was due to the sport of Mensur. The game of Mensur, or academic fencing, was only practiced in the most prestigious universities, the German equivalent of Oxford or Cambridge. So all of the young men that were studying there became known as the officer class. They were usually from aristocratic or very upper class backgrounds. Many of the upper class men with their dueling scars then found themselves as the officers and generals in World War II. Mensour was a sport, much like fencing today in the Olympics. The main difference is that there was no headgear. A disagreement over the most trivial issue could result in a challenge to be settled over Mensur. The two students would sometimes wear protection on their arms and their neck, metal goggles, and even sometimes a nose guard, because in the past it was very common for students to have their noses sliced off, while the face was left completely exposed. The reason for this is that the facial scar was actually desirable for them, and the two students were not allowed to flinch or move or dodge any of the attacks. They had to stand completely still and fence their opponent. The swords were much more like slashing swords, different to the swords that they use in the Olympics. Different to fencing swords, they were more for cutting and slashing. The injury from a stabbing sword is much more dangerous, could, puncture your lungs, really damage or kill you. Whereas if they're slashing each other, most of the time it's just a flesh wound. And they had as many rounds as necessary until there was a winner. Each round lasted around 20 seconds. And when someone was cut and blood was drawn, there was a break in the action. And this would go on until one student eventually gave up. There was always a medical doctor at these duels to provide medical attention and stitch up any of the wounds, much like you'd see today in boxing or in the UFC. By the end of these duels, one or if not both of the students would have a scar on their cheek. It was usually the left cheek because they generally held the sword with the right hand. The Mensour scar, or the dueling scar, sometimes even referred to as the Nazi dueling scar, became a fashion trend amongst upper-class German men. Men who had these scars were seen as more attractive to women and were looked up to by their friends. They believed that the scars not only showed bravery and courage, but also if a man was good husband material. The ultimate goal was to look as manly and as stoic as possible. So much so that after the Mensour fights, the students began to pack the cut with horsehair so it wouldn't heal properly. After some time, they would take the horsehair out and the wound would heal in a more pronounced and even discolored way. There were even some men who weren't brave enough to take part in these Mensour bouts, but still wanted the prestige that came with the scar. So they would purposely cut their face in order to get the same effect. Some would even pay a doctor willing to use the scalpel on their face. Otto Scorzi was a high-ranking German officer who also happened to have a very large and pronounced dueling scar on his left cheek. He was described in newspapers and media outlets at the time as being the most dangerous man in Europe. He also took part in the Gran Sasso raid in 1943, which was a German airborne operation that rescued Benito Mussolini from captivity. German military law actually permitted men to partake in these duels of honor until shortly after World War I. But during the Third Reich, from 1933 till 1945, Mensur was prohibited at all German universities. The Nazi government saw academic fencing as part of the German fraternities that had existed in these universities for centuries. And they viewed these fraternities as a remnant of the previous government and wanted to disband them completely. This ended Mensour at all German universities, but it led to the establishment of underground fight clubs. The former fraternities would organize and practice Mensour bouts underground, undetected by the Nazi secret police. But after the war, these fraternities were re-established and the Mensour fencing tradition carried on. Since World War II, Mensour's popularity has declined. It's now only practiced in around 300 traditional fraternities in Germany, Poland, and across Central Europe. Thank you for watching. If you liked that video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more interesting historical content. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.